Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena and God. In this conversation, I chatted with Andy Lipshultz. Andy actually came on the podcast probably a couple years ago now, and I'm going to link the first episode to this so you can actually see that conversation because that was super fun as well. So he's a voice over talent. So basically, what that means is he is the one who creates different voiceovers for whether it's audiobooks or trainings, and sometimes even animated stuff and so on. He's really, really talented. But before he got into this career, he's had like multiple different careers in completely different things, starting in like the music industry and then going into banking and a couple of things in between, before he actually went and did this voice talent independently. And we talked about career change, and I thought he was just the perfect guest to have to talk about the career change and what it takes and how do you recognize when it's time for a change? How do you stay innovative in your own career? How do you pivot? How do you see something at the end of a career coming or the end of an industry? And how do you actually find time to pivot? What are the setbacks that you have to think about? What are the compromises you have to make? So really realistic approach to career change from somebody who's done it several times from very different industries. I found that really fascinating, very practical stuff. So check it out if you're interested in career change. Check it out if you're interested in entrepreneurship and being a voice talent, because I think it's such a unique space and not a lot of people are aware of the opportunities that are available there. And yeah, it's just, if you're a career change seeker and you just need to listen to an inspiring story and maybe get some tips and practical steps that you can take yourself, this is definitely for you. Check it out. Please, as always, follow, subscribe, and come back for more. Andy, welcome back to Shift.
Good to be back. I'm shifting back.
You have shifted back. Back to the podcast, but forward in life.
They're calling me Shifty.
That's really excited to chat with you again. Before we start recording, we were talking about how fast time goes by, and it's been like 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Like I was using my
Yeah.
old thumbnails when you came on the first time. Like it's just wild. And you've done a lot of things since then, and we talked about different topics and like what can we talk about. And I think one of the most interesting things about you is just how dynamic your career has been and how you've gone through your own change. And this podcast is all about change, and it's all about specifically, well, obviously I like to focus on careers. So I'm really curious, let's kick it off from there. Just kind of, the calm, curious career changer. Talk to me about that.
Cool. Well, I'll just give you like a quick overview of the trajectory of all the careers I've had, and
Yeah.
then I'm not going to do it in context. I'll just come back because it's like three key inflection points that I thought be worthwhile that other people might get something out of. So yeah, work like a lot of people started working at an early age. Like I delivered papers at 12, and when people got the newspaper, I still do. Before college, waited tables. Post college, actually started in the traditional music industry. Worked at record labels and distribution for record labels, and then made a pivot to what I like to call entertainment tech, which initially was like kiosks and record stores, which is funny. There's non-connected. Um, Kiosks when people would say, "Hey, do you have this record in stock?" And they'd say no, and they'd look at the kiosk, go to the kiosk, punch it in, and give the clerk a piece of paper and say, "Can you order this for me, please?" Kind of funny now to think about both
Yeah.
all the antiquated technology that was there. Worked for the Billboard of College Radio, CMJ, as they were trying to .comify themselves. Worked for some of the earliest music subscription services, Sony and Universal joint venture called Press Play. Worked for mobile carriers putting mute. So the shift to telecom as they worked to put music and content on cell phones for Nextel, then Sprint, then worked for a vendor that put music on cell phones for Verizon and T-Mobile. And then a real turn went to Capital One, and I was there for 6 years, 7 years, something like that. Um, and a big part of that time was helping relaunch some of their mobile apps. And then another turn went to after that went to Centene, which is a Fortune 25, something like that, healthcare company, government sponsored healthcare, and did a variety of product management things for them. And then my last job there before going full time voiceover was doing the doing like overseeing the web analytics for the organization. Um, Meanwhile, concurrent to several of those jobs, I had been working on building a voiceover career, which um, as I think that's for like the past 7, 8 years, somewhere in there. And the past year and a half of that, I've been full-time voiceover and voiceover marketing coaching. So
Yeah.
lots and lots and lots and lots of change, but like three
Mm-hmm.
big shifts, if you will, in there.
Yeah. No, I love it. And they're all like so many of them are so different. Like I can kind of see some connection, but some of it is just like so completely different. And then you were able to do that. And it's almost like starting over. And I think that's the scary part for people is like, oh my God, I have to start over. So
Yeah.
how did you, what was it for you? Was it just, it's almost like you redefined what success means to you? Because success, at least in the outdated terms, is like you stay in a company, you grow in this expertise area and so on, versus you've kind of shifted around,
Yeah.
and created these almost like separate careers along the way, and then sideline to that have this voiceover business. So
Sure.
I mean, we'll dive into that in a minute, but I'm curious, like, how did you find, like, how did you, were you okay with making the changes? Were they like thought out like changes, or was it just like you kind of fell into it or had to do it?
It was all generally intentional. And actually that the first two inflection points I think kind of really deal with that. Like the when I first left college, as many people leaving school do, they're like, what the hell am I going to do now?
Mm,
And like the world was full of possibilities, and it felt exciting but also overwhelming. And I remember sitting in my I was in a fraternity at the time. I was sitting on the roof of my fraternity. Everyone had basically gone home. I'd just graduated. And I said, well, what can I do? And I actually wrote out kind of the equivalent of a bucket list that wasn't necessarily all professional. It was a combination of professional and personal. And I looked at it and just kind of said to myself, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And to the point of where I got excited about the future, and it made everything seem achievable. And so I had been intimidated to go into the music industry, just thought, oh, I don't know if I can do that, etc. And realized, no, 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 I actually can. And at the time, this is pre-internet, the information about what made the music industry the way it was, how do I actually find things near where I live, etc., wasn't available. I was going to the library and all those types of things. But it was very intentional in terms of, at that point, just getting my mindset into, okay, I know I want music. I don't necessarily know the possibilities per se. So let me figure out a way to educate myself and learn what those are, and then
mm,
systematically go after those things that work, and give myself kind of a timetable in which I need to do it. Otherwise, I need to pivot.
mm,
And that wound me with my first job working for a music wholesaler in Baltimore, Maryland, before I wound up working for the major labels. Um,
mm.
so the major labels were like Capitol and Virgin, et cetera. That was
Yeah.
some of my music industry stuff. The
You
second
know,
one was the hardest one. Go ahead.
can I pause for a second? Because I
Yeah,
think that's
please.
such an interesting point. Because when people come to me for like career counseling and stuff, they're just, it's like, well, I'm not sure what I want. And I think, and what I liked about what you said is you're like, you just knew you wanted music, but music is huge. Like, there's so many paths where you can take in music. And I love it that you're like, okay, I just started like digging into basically like some areas that would be interesting to you within the music industry. And I think that's such a just a practical way to approach things because we don't know what we don't know.
Hmm.
Especially if you're going into a new industry, you don't know what
Yeah,
to expect, but you just know
yeah,
you want to be in this industry, and then
yeah,
doing that research and like just taking baby steps, and then eventually, it's that intentionality, like you knew you
yeah.
wanted to be there, and then taking the small steps to get there. I think that's so powerful because it's so practical, and I think a lot of times we get caught up in our minds of like trying to have this perfect plan, and sometimes it's just as much as just as simple as, listen, I know I want to do this. Let me just dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and I had a sense of certain things I wanted, but knew that they weren't practical. Like I, at the time, I thought I wanted to go into A&R, which is essentially trying to figure out the artist to bring to the label. But I knew that in Washington D.C., that was less likely unless I moved up to New York, and I wasn't even sure how to get there. I later realized, hey, I'm not cool enough to do that. I know music's gonna hit, but it's kind of a coolocracy, and I was never that cool. Um,
Yeah.
but along those lines, I actually my oldest, when he went to college, was unsure what schools he wanted to go to and where he wanted to major. And so I actually went the opposite direction with him, and I took the list of every major available. I said, okay, you might not know what you want, but I bet you know what you don't want. So
Mm,
let's take this list of majors and let's cross off every single one. You're like, no, no, no. Oh, maybe. No, no. And we got down to like 5 or 6. And that
mm,
really kind of validated, I think, in some ways, what he already knew to a degree.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think that was helpful for him because when the world seems so big, well, how do you make it smaller? Well, cut out the things that are not, that you know are not the world you want to be in.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that,
that's really helpful. Yeah.
yeah. Um, for me, though, you kind of pointed it out before, that was a big shift going for, I said I wanted to be in music, but then I went to entertainment tech, which at the time when I was at the record label, a lot of my identity was caught up in, hey, I work for Capitol Records and Virgin Records, and it was, you couldn't separate those things. It was a big part of my identity,
Mm,
and I saw that the music industry was shrinking. I was getting promotions in pay, but what felt like demotions in promotions in pay and title, but almost like demotions or lateral moves in responsibility. And because at the time the music industry was shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. What is like in the big like 2 or 3 record labels now? It was like the big 5 or big 6. Um, I was at EMI, which is no longer a thing. It's been subsumed. So I had read the business book Build to Last. And the thing that I saw in that, I might have mentioned this last time we spoke, I can't remember, is that the book, have you read it?
I have, I think. I
Yeah.
just don't
Yeah.
remember, but I know the
As I s
name. Yeah.
So when I
Yeah.
talk about it, you'll be go, "Oh, yeah, I know that
Yeah.
book."
Yeah.
They had looked at, the 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 companies that were perennially number 1 or number 2 over long periods of time. And they
Right.
said, well, why do they succeed and these other ones are kind of also rans? They're number 5, 10, or disappear. Um, and the thing that these businesses knew is that who they were at their core, what are they good at, and then what can change. And
Mm,
so going back to your comment about, hey, I know I wanted music. Well, I thought to myself, well, I love music. Um, I want it to be a big part of what I do and who I am, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean I have to be at a record label. I and I just dig it. So what can change? And
mm,
what do I bring to the table? So I thought about that and said, what can and can't change? And that's when I made a purposeful pivot to technology that involved that subject matter. So it kept my passion of like, I love the subject matter. I think this part, but I think that this industry is dying. This industry is not. Let me go where the world's going.
mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that allowed me to, it was harder though, to make that shift to a degree, just because, again, when your identity is so tied up in this, and I had like almost a couple stages of this where you go to someone at a party and you're like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I say, oh, I work at a record label. And people are like, oh, really? Tell me about that. And then later when I'm talking about the technology things, yeah, okay. And then when I'm like, I work at Capital One. Uh, okay. And it's
Yeah.
that's no shade on Capital One. I actually
Yeah.
think it's a very amazing company, but not the world is not like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Even though it is cool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so kind of getting your head around that was different. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
It does, and I think you bring out a good point that we're so tied in with that identity of where we work, right? Versus just staying true to your music in your case, like that theme that you love. You love music. You didn't really care where you would be doing that, like as long as it's involved that. And I think that's so helpful and important because a lot of people are right now. There's a lot of changes in the job market and in general just a lot of things happening with technology and all the other stuff that's going on in the economy. And I think a lot of people finding themselves out of, they've been at a job A for 10, 15 years and now they're so tied into that area, that work, that company that they don't they don't even know how to reposition or even talk about themselves. And I love this point because it's like, well, no, you just talk about what is it that you loved about working at that company. It's not even the company, but the work, the industry, the theme, whatever you want to call it. Like that's what matters actually, and that makes it so much easier to then tell that career story, which is the biggest thing that people struggle with, is telling their career story. So I think that is so, like, that's such a great tip.
Yeah, and getting your and believing it, because at the time
Mm-hmm.
I had to really take an assessment of like, okay, what am I good at? What can change? What is like a this is a non-negotiable. I need to be doing these types of things. And then really kind of pushing myself on the non-negotiables, because sometimes you can push yourself into like a really narrow thing, especially
Mm,
when you've been doing the same thing over and over. Conversely, you can actually make the world your oyster and not really realize that no, the world is not your oyster. Because I've talked to many people that have said, oh, you know what? I'll just go into city planning. You've never had a city planning job. And yes, your skills are transferable, but in this market, oftentimes, unless you know somebody, I mean, and if you're like later stage career, earlier stage is probably easier. Um,
mm-hmm.
but it's a little harder to say, hey, my piece of paper does not scream this, but I know I can do it. Whereas, the 200 other line items that the resume scanner shows, people that have more experience, okay,
Mm,
yeah, you could do it, but you might not get the chance. So it's how do you, to your point, like how do you make that story that's believable? Like that like you're like, yeah, I buy that. It's not just spin,
yeah.
um, and you have enough to back it up.
Mm. And then, so take me back to the voiceover part. Like, at what point, and we did talk a little bit about it on the podcast last time, but for people who are
Yeah.
new to this, like, how did you get into voiceover? Like, at what point you were like, this is it? Because you do amazing work. And for people who are listening, like, I'm gonna tag this episode with the first episode because you made a bunch of really cool, I don't even know what to call it, voiceovers. What is it called? Like voice.
Voices, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, something, but it was really, really cool, and we had a really fun episode the
Yeah.
first time. But how did it, tell me, how did you get into that for people who are
Am I
first
not
listening?
nerdy and fun enough for you yet? So that actually kind of blends in with my third inflection point. So the third one was when I was staring myself in the face, where I found like corporately I kept hitting the same point where I would get promoted past either a level of where I was happy or good at the thing that got promoted to, or both, like where I was like, I'm unhappy and I suck, or I suck but I'm happy. But either one, where I was like, you know what, I can't keep repeating the same pattern. What do I need to do? And so I thought about it, and I bought this book called Designing Your Life. I may mention this last. I probably did because it's been a while. But and the people that made Design Thinking made this book. I
Mhm.
believe I could be BSing that, but I think so. Um, and it's a series of exercises that help you blend your personal view, your world view, your work view into creating multiple, at least two, plan A's of your life. Not plan A, plan B, but plan A, plan A. Like if you cover up one version of your life and you say, "Oh no, wait, I wanted that one," that then they're not two true plan A's. But essentially, thinking about what do you want your life to look like, both professionally and personally, and then finding a way to test and learn your way into it. So I had often really wanted to do voiceover. Just throughout my life, people said, "Oh, you have an interesting voice," and I said, "You know what? Yes, I do have an interesting voice." And the kids were like, "Do the voices, please, Dad." So I said, "You know what? I'm kind of an idiot. That seems like it might work for me." And so I did a series of test and learns, and it was a trajectory. So initially, had my full-time job. I started coaching, like I learned a little bit about the industry first to say, hey, can I dip my toe in the water here? Um, and then I said, you know what? Okay, the first thing is let's see if you're good at the performance part. So I took some coaching, and initially wasn't as good as I thought it was at that time. Now I'm awesome, but at that time, um, and so I kept going, and then had had a little bit of more traction. And so then I said, you know what? I think that this could be a thing. I made a got a demo, got a website. Concurrently, said okay, it worked. That's when I transitioned from Capital One to Centene, and I purposely took a step back, wherein I was looking for jobs that were not managing people anymore, that were more kind of like things that I could do a very competent, decent job with, a good
Mhm.
above average job, but weren't necessarily as taxing and would give me the headspace
Mhm.
to try this new thing out. So I didn't just go like headlong into it. I basically, again, this is testing and learning. And so if it, crashed, okay, I still got a job. Um, and took a pay cut, like a purposeful pay cut. Um,
Mhm.
and then I started marketing, auditioning. I did a book with Learning Ally, which is actually a really cool place that lets you do voiceover. Doesn't let you do. It creates audiobooks for kids with learning that are developmentally delayed.
Mhm.
And so it just getting little bona fides, again, testing like, hey, can I do this? This room was nothing but sleeping bags at the time. I know I showed you the picture last time.
Yeah.
And so with a little success, then I said, okay, this seems like it is potentially a thing. Let's kick it up a notch. So then put more time and money in, upgraded my studio, upgraded my gear. So goodbye, $75 mic. Hello, I think this is my second mic here. This is my $300 or $400 mic. This is my $1,000 mic.
Oh.
So it's like like little by little taking steps up. Upgraded the software, upgraded the room, got a new preamp, then more training. Okay, now I'm going to go. My first genre was commercial. Now it's e-learning, then animation. Now let me get my marketing and automate my marketing. Oh, I need to teach myself how to work on HubSpot and really become, like, because I have an MBA, so use my MBA for marketing to market. Um, More conferences. Then I was like, okay, I'm actually getting some traction here. I met with a financial planner. Again, this is all to go full time. Hey, dude, when can I start making the small bucks? You know, because meaning like when can I take this, get rid of the big salary job and go to a job that does not
Mhm.
pay as well. Um, and he gave me a number, and I said, oh, I am making that number now.
Mhm.
So I would like to diversify a little bit longer to because the bulk of that was like concentrated in like three or four clients, and the rest of it was one job here, one job here, one job here, one job
Mhm.
here, because that's the nature of voiceover. It's just a volume game because individual jobs are like nothing.
Mhm.
um and I got to a point where I could go full time, and it was probably a little earlier than I wanted, but I left the corporate world and said, you know what? I think I'm not going to get another corporate job. I'm just going to stay and make this a full time thing, and still always building. And it's been great. I love it, and you're always building new things and kind of going where the puck might go because now AI threatens. So I'm going like into political voiceover because I do right now. I do commercials and games and animation and audio dramas and
Mhm.
training and oh gosh. E-learning, as always, commercial animation. I said that,
Yeah.
and now political character stuff. And I'm working. I'm doing more things like audiobooks, and I also do marketing coaching now too.
That's very cool. As you're speaking, you've made such intentional but also scary decisions, like that are scary to a lot of people. And so, as you're speaking, the two kind of things come up, and it's like courage and curiosity, because it takes a lot of courage to, even though you kind of had intention, like it sounded like you had a plan, but as we know, like plans go wrong. So it was still
Yeah.
taking a risk, a calculated risk, it sounds like, but still taking a risk, and it takes a lot of courage. And you're not doing this in your 20s. You're a father of three kids, you're married, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have responsibilities, right? Like, so risk appetite is probably not as high maybe as for somebody in their 20s. Maybe that I'm just assuming, but So it's like, courage and curiosity are the two kind of words that come up as you're talking, because taking a cut, going from a manager position to an individual contributor, right? Making a little bit less just to build out this kind of dream and what you are really good at and what wanted to do. I think it's brilliant. But I'm curious, like, how did you get so courageous and curious? Because I think that's the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, is the fear, and also just maybe not even being reflective or interested enough to be curious. And is it a skill that you've always had, or is it something that you've developed? Like, what could be helpful to people who are listening that are like, that's great, I'm not courageous enough to do this? Like, what helped you?
I'm chicken shiz. So that's, I appreciate that. And I think that I've got a couple things that were incredibly helpful. I have a very understanding and supportive wife, so who also works. So I think that affords a little bit of flexibility as well. I mean, she's a
Hmm.
teacher, so it's not like, like, hey, we're in the money, but
Yeah.
but we have health care. She makes a good salary, etc. That's helpful. Um, I also try to arm myself with information. I can be courageous, but I need to kind of feel like I at least have a bit of information to help myself get over those fears. There's also I've seen the effects of inaction. So one of the jobs I had when I was at the vendor for that did the services for Verizon and T-Mobile, my kids were younger, and I could see the industry shrinking. That was putting music on cell phones, and I could see the industry shrinking, 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 and I knew it was. And I probably stayed about 2 or 3 years past where I should have, and I know my skills were atrophying because the market was doing a bunch of interesting things. Part of why I went to Capital One was because I and that was also a shift. I didn't put it as a big inflection point, but it was a big shift going from anything related to entertainment to Capital One. But I felt like, where can I learn if I don't want to move, because we were back in D.C., not in New York anymore, and I'm from Maryland. We were back in D.C. at the time. Where could I learn? So it was like, okay, it's a shift. It's not necessarily being courageous per se. It's arming yourself with the information and, to your point, like calculated risks where, okay, what's the downside of moving? What's the downside of inaction? And I think that's really where I kind of got my head. And maybe that's the TLDR, is what's the downside of inaction? And okay, I'm unhappy. Can you put a price tag on that? Um, and so it's like, okay, well, how do I get myself happier? What are the various ways I can do that? And
Mhm.
what's the worst that can happen? Okay, I don't have a job. Okay, I will just go get another job. Now, I know that's easy to say in this market. For me now, this market might be a little tougher. But if you understand your information, meet with a financial planner. What do you have to make versus what do you want to make?
Mhm. I think that's so practical and accessible to everybody listening. I mean, it's just, I especially now, like I hear a lot of people just like wondering, like, how do I do this? And I think what you've laid out is just perfect. I mean, I think having a supportive spouse or partner, whoever, or family member, right? Like it's super, super important. It allows you to be a little bit, more courageous and so on. That's so important. But
Yeah.
then the information piece is equally as important. Like try to minimize risk by educating yourself about topic X, Y, and Z. And I think the other piece is the financials, like just understanding how much you actually need, right? Like how much are you willing to, because I think at that point you'll also recognize, like, am I willing to make the sacrifice for this short period of time to
Yeah.
fulfill a larger mission, which is to be happy, and
Yeah.
like it's worth it. And I think at that point, this is where a lot of people realize, like, am I really unhappy, or do I really want to make this change, right? Or not? And
Yeah.
if it's, if you do, you'll do what you need to do and you take those steps, and it makes everything less scary and so on. And I think that's really just super practical.
Now, conversely, there's and I kind of have to remind myself of this because there's some level of like, hey, I have some level of cushion, whereas there might be folks that do not. I remember my
Mm,
first job, I was miserable, miserable. My first music industry job, I was miserable after the 6 months, and I felt
mm,
like there's no way out. I ultimately kind of like just, through brawn and push, got myself out to get to the major labels. But I was miserable. My wife, at one point, she was arguing with health insurance about one of the charges we had. And it was basically the insurance company owed us like $3,000 or $5,000 or something ridiculous like that. And they kept denying it. And it was should have been covered. They were just playing games. And she got really mad and she was like, how can you live with yourself? How can you work for a company like this? And there was a long pause, and the guy on the phone said, "Ma'am, I need this job."
Mm.
And it really like she's told that story, and I think about that because I'm like, yeah, like I can be like, "Yay me! Look at all the things I've done," but that's not necessarily everybody's station in life. So, I think I've been not quite there, but I've been in places, different parts of life where things were tighter, and I thought about, okay, if I can't make that big change today, where do I want to get, and what are the small things I can do that inch me closer to where I get to? So if nothing else, I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. Because if you wake up every day and you're like, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks, and you don't have the headroom to think about the other things, okay, what can I give up to give myself that headroom to start thinking about those small changes to make? Because
Mm.
that's, I think that's how to try to make that change. But even that takes courage, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out. That yeah, as you were speaking, also I was like just thinking about like the time where I had to do something because I had to do and how much it sucked. And I think everybody listening to this probably had a job that you just hated, but you have to be there. And you're right. Like it's very hard to sometimes, especially because I think when you're in a job that you really don't like or just hate, not, forget don't like completely miserable in, it is so mentally exhausting that by the time you're done with that job at the end of the day, you don't have anything left in you.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
like try
It's
to get out
draining.
of that. It's so draining when you mentally just so draining to your soul and everything else that you
Yeah.
don't even have the energy. Yeah, and I sympathize with people. I've been there for sure, but I like this. What you said is like find that little space to get out of that because that it doesn't have to be huge drastic changes, but it's like little baby space to just find that space to make a plan to get out of that hole. And I mean, it's brilliant. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you
And,
for pointing that out.
and if you think that you're decent at your job, then
Mm,
okay, where can I take a calculated risk to be not as good as I am to give myself that space? Okay, I'm not going to take that call. I'm not going to do this project. I'm going to okay, this is good enough. Ship it. Something that like basically lets you say, okay, now I'm going to take this 10, 15 minutes to think about this other thing. Otherwise, if you're basically constantly like trying to excel in a job you don't like or to keep the job you don't like,
mhm.
I mean, sometimes getting canned is one of the best things for you. But it is, there has to be something, and you want the forcing function to be yourself, not someone forcing it on you, because that adds even more pressure.
Yeah.
For sure. Around
Yeah.
around September 11th, uh, during the dot-com crash, my company essentially laid off like everybody, and I was the hardest working unemployed person you've ever met,
Mm,
and literally like I would go every day, and I mean I'm guessing it's a similar market now, wherein I would like apply, but I couldn't find anything to apply after a while. There was like literally there's nothing being posted because kind of the
mm,
whole it wasn't quite COVID, but it was
yeah.
similar, and it was super 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 deflating. And so figuring out a way to kind of get the right head mindset there was something, but also kind of thinking about, okay, well, how do I not do that again? Make sure that I'm basically taking the action so that I'm always doing something at least I'm happy in. But it
Mm,
actually it actually again worked out for something even better, which they always do.
mm.
They always do.
Yeah. And I think that's also an important lesson. And and obviously the sooner you learn it, the better. And sometimes people don't learn it until their 30s and 40s and sometimes even 50s. But this lesson of going through the struggle of like being laid off or losing a job or being at the rock bottom and then getting out of it so that you're that much more resilient. And so whenever if it does, you can do everything possible to prepare for it to not happen again. And it might, but at least you have the resilience and the confidence that, you know what, I've been here, I know what this is, and I know it's temporary. And I think that's so hard for a lot of people right now. It's just, to just accept that this is temporary and just keep going, keep going. Consistency, action, beats inaction anytime. And it's hard, and it's hard, but I think the sooner, people learn that lesson, and I was lucky to learn it very early on in my career. Several times I had to learn it several times.
Yeah, and
But
I think getting laid
yeah,
off. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no,
Getting
but yeah, go ahead.
getting laid off, it's kind of like, it's like the devil going, I'm gonna eat your soul. Like it is like
Mm,
really, it can really hurt your ego in a way that you don't necessarily realize, even if it is like, okay, it's like corporate layoffs and et cetera, but it's like, why me? Um, and
mm,
I think that it's helpful, especially when your identity is so tied into your work, to realize, okay, I need to have at least an X amount of separation, because as much as they love you, things take a bad turn. They may or may not, you're even be a family business. Things take a bad turn, you may be expendable. So how do you kind of give yourself the headspace to ensure that not only they happy with you, but you're happy with them? Because otherwise, things can suck, and you don't and you just let inertia go, and all of a sudden it's 5 years later, and
mm.
you're just like, why did I just waste my life doing that just so I could get a paycheck um, that I'm not necessarily happy with? Again, assuming you have a little bit of leeway, if you're in a position where, like the guy that was on the other end of the phone, that's with my wife, I understand that, and I'm not poo-pooing that at all. Like sometimes you just got to do what you got to do and just
Mhm.
muscle through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this conversation just has so many gems. Like, I just can't wait to release it. I think it's people are really gonna benefit. No, really, like it's so practical, so real, so relatable, and I just absolutely loved it. So, as you're kind of taking your business to kind of the next level and the next stage, what are some things you're looking for? Like, where can people find you? Where they can connect with you? What are some things you're excited about? Like share in case people listening and they're like, hey, Andy, you're exactly what we've been looking for type thing, or I'd love to connect and just chat with you a bit more.
Well, I'm glad you asked. Now, so andysaysit.com is where you can find my voiceover. And if you're out there and you're like, I'm a corporate person, and I would like someone to sound corporate so we can talk to people like a partner, then that is you can find me there and hit me up, Andy at andysaysit.com. So whether you're a company out there looking for like an explainer video, whether it be internal or external, a commercial, trying to get people to buy your wares, or you happen to be an animator on the side and you're like, that guy makes the voices and I think he's a good character. I am a good character. Um, uh, those are the kinds of folks that I can be helpful for. I doubt you have that many people that are voiceover artists, but if you have voiceover artists, I also do voiceover marketing coaching, which is also at that site. But that's where you find me. And I've done a variety of things. Like the clients that I've worked for have ranged from Google and Amazon and AT&T, Bridgestone. I did a really cool thing. I'm under NDA for what it was, but I did something for Lego that's pretty damn cool. Um, and the eh, I try to think if there's anything else there that I could share, but I've done a lot of training and a lot of corporate narration type things as well.
That's awesome. Well, I'll make sure to share your website and link our previous episodes so people can also kind of hear your story in more depth to this episode. And yeah, it's great to reconnect with you. It's always a fun
Yeah,
chatting with you. Every time I talk to you, it's always super
you
interesting. And
too.
and I'm sure in like hopefully not in 2 years, but maybe in a year from now, we'll talk more. and just see where you've shifted next, or how you shifted your business.
Or just have our AIs talk to each other.
Or
Hey,
we
how
just
you
have our
doing?
AIs talk to each other. So
A lot less,
whichever way this
a
goes.
lot more. Those would be a lot more bland conversations with more
Yeah,
emojis and M dashes.
exactly. So no, we'll stick to the real stuff. But anyway, it's good to see you, Andy. Thanks for
You
coming
too.
back.
All right, thanks.